Let me start by saying thank you for the invitation. I was one of your professors at the Methodist Theological School in Ohio, Charlotte, and I've known her for a very long time, and so we've become good friends and fellow ministers. And you're lucky to have her, I'd say. She's a good person. Our second reading is from John 20, verses 24 to 29, and this is from the famous doubting Thomas. Poor guy gets a bad rap. He did many other things, but let's just see what he did in this case. Okay, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the scars of the nails in his hands, and put my finger on those scars and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, the disciples were together again indoors, and Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Then reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop your doubting and believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Do you believe because you see me? How happy are those who believe without seeing me." It sounds like Jesus is reprimanding Thomas, but I'm going to suggest maybe that's not exactly the way it was. Okay, so what I want to ask you today is, are doubts bad for you? Does it hurt you if you have doubts? Well, as you know, and as we all know, we live in a very anxious world right now. Trust is in very short supply. Many don't trust the government, for instance. Some don't trust the medical establishment, and a few don't even trust their family or their friends, right? Behind this distrust is doubt. Will people be there for me? Will people or doctors or the government hurt me? What can I believe about all these things now? Well, as you probably know, hearing about stress and all that on TV, radio, internet, these doubts can hurt us. Excuse me, even physically, making us more anxious, worried, fearful, even cynical. They can especially hurt us if they're unfounded or unexamined. They hurt us especially if we just follow the latest fearmonger or alarmist. Okay, we know that. But what about your faith, right? What about Christianity? Does this wide-ranging anxiety spread to that? Can doubts be bad for us? Or are they protective, as many people think? Many people think they're protecting themselves with doubts. Can doubts hurt us spiritually? Or can they be used protectively or even for good? Doubts can spread. Anxiety spreads. It starts covering everything. Well, I was talking to a therapist friend of mine a while back recently, and I asked her if religion ever comes up in her sessions. I figured it probably wouldn't. It's really not what they're trained to deal with. But she surprised me by saying, yes, often. It comes up all the time. I was surprised. And she said the most common theme is that people tell her they have questions and doubts about their religion, about their faith, but they're afraid to admit it, and on top of that, they feel guilty about it. So let me ask you this. Has anyone here been told that you should just believe? Or that doubts mean you aren't a real Christian? Or that you're bad if you have doubts? I bet some people here have been told that. Well, in my opinion, telling people that is a big mistake, because it often just pushes people away from the church and even from religion in general. Or it causes them to hide their authentic self and makes going to church more like a habit than a faith experience. Why do I say this? Well, because I've done a lot of research on people who call themselves spiritual but not religious. I've interviewed hundreds of people all around North America that use that title for themselves, and I've written a book called Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual But Not Religious. You can find it on Kindle, Amazon. It's Oxford University Press. Now, my interviews with SBNRs, that's what I call them, SBNRs, showed, believe it or not, Not that they were hurt by the church, not that the church wasn't friendly, not that was cliquish. They rarely said that. They said that doubt was the major reason they don't want to be religious or attend services. Is that a surprise to you? I think we assume we must have hurt them in some way and we weren't aware of it, but that's not what I heard. In fact, some of them missed the church a lot. And believe it or not, what they missed the most was like potlucks. Really. Getting together, being with people, they liked it. And they liked the peacefulness of the sanctuary, all that. But they felt they had to leave. Now, because of the doubt. Now, they weren't atheists, and many of them believed in some kind of higher power. Many of them still prayed or did other kinds of devotions. So if they weren't atheists, then what were their doubts about? Well, they were more about things they couldn't understand, didn't make sense to them, or they had trouble believing in. They thought that just having doubts made them different from the people they saw sitting in the pews or people that they knew were religious. And many of them left the church because of this or were afraid to ever go. But spiritual but not religious people I spoke to said that no one had ever sat down and listened to them. Now, of course, some of them were afraid to admit or talk about their doubts. Okay. But overall, most felt that their doubts disqualified them from attending religious services. Even for the few brave ones who expressed their doubts to others, they often found only shock or condemnation. Very few they spoke with were willing to say, because not everybody has an answer automatically, right? Very few were able to say to them, let me get back to you on that, and then go do their homework to help them find answers, and especially to reassure them that God doesn't condemn us because we have doubts. It sounded like in that passage Jesus was saying that Thomas was a bad boy because he had doubts, but I don't really think that's what that passage is about. So doubt gets a bad rap because it calls up the image of, as one of my non-church-going friends said, someone waving their bony finger in my face. And that's why she didn't go to church. What about Thomas? Let's get back to him briefly. Well, have you been called, or have you ever been afraid of being called a doubting Thomas? I know you probably don't want to admit it, but I bet some of us here have. Well, Thomas has gotten a bad rap in our interpretation of this passage. Why did Thomas want proof? Because Thomas wasn't around like the other disciples. He hadn't witnessed Jesus' return, complete with scars from the crucifixion, like the others had. It's not that he disbelieved in Jesus. He just wanted to see for himself. He wanted to make sure. I don't think that's an evil or a bad thing. He wanted to have what the others had. So he asked for that reassurance, and Jesus gave it to him promptly. He didn't sit there looking at him like, really? Come on, Thomas, can you just believe? He didn't do that. He was like immediately said, okay, here, try this. Once Thomas had that reassurance, he immediately fell down and worshiped Jesus, and then what we often don't know about is that he went on to become a very powerful missionary for the gospel. So you can see here, if you really read it closely, and in other places, that Jesus doesn't condemn and reject people who have doubt. But I think I've taken it too far. I think we need to back up for a second and clarify what doubt really is. This is really an important part of the message, because what is doubt really? Okay? Well, doubt and unbelief are two different things. Disbelief says, this isn't true. But doubt is more like a question, asking, what if what I believe isn't true? It's like an insecurity thing. I'm going to suggest to you that the questioning that we get with doubt is not a cause for guilt or worry or even low self-esteem. Why, you might ask? Well, it all depends on how you treat these doubts. More on that later. But first we need to realize something very important about doubt. And I hope that this is something that makes you feel a little more relaxed. Doubt is common, and doubt is normal. Do you think here that you're the only one, with everyone else sitting around you full of confidence, trust, and belief, that you're the only one that has some doubts here and there? I know from my interviews that that's not the case. I was doing research for this book, and I would go to churches, and I would say, I just assumed everybody there was not spiritual but not religious. And so I would go in and I'd say to the pastor, can I make a little announcement? And I was visiting theologian at different places, and so I said, can I ask for people to send me their kids, their grandkids, or anybody else they know who considers themselves spiritual but not religious, so I could interview them. I didn't think anybody from the congregation would be volunteering, because they were there, right? But invariably, after the service, I had people come up to me, take me aside, pull me away from the pastor, who this is pre-pandemic, was shaking hands with everybody, and whisper, you should interview me. I'm really spiritual but not religious. I even had ministers say that to me. That really opened my eyes. It made me realize that if you have a doubt, you're probably surrounded by other people that have doubts. Maybe doubts of different things than yours, but many, many people go through these phases of doubting. Now, I've taught at a seminary for 32 years. That's how I met Charlotte. And I've seen many students, most planning to enter the ministry or do some other kind of religious work, have doubts. Even though they're there, they've already, they're taking a Master of Divinity degree, but they have doubts. Now, fortunately, they were in a safe place in the classroom. And so we would work through these doubts in my theology classes. And most important, I would give them the tools to deal with their doubts and with other people's doubts as they went forward. These are tools anybody can use, because every person of faith is inevitably a theologian. Maybe you never thought of yourself like that, but you don't have to have a PhD to do theology. Because every time you think about God and your faith, we're essentially doing theology. So did you know that many people of great faith have struggled with doubt? Were you aware of that? Of course, Mother Teresa, we know about her. She went through a very long, dark night of the soul, where she felt nothing, and I'm sure she had many doubts. But she kept on doing what she felt called to do by God, but she's famous. But here's another story that you might not know. I was at a place in Switzerland. It was a Christian retreat center called L'Abri. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. But the founder was a man named Francis Schaeffer. He was an ordained minister, and he was sent by his denomination as a missionary to Europe after World War II, because the churches were a mess and many people didn't know what to believe anymore. And so they sent him there to help reconstruct churches and reconstruct congregations after World War II. But one day he realized, looking at all this devastation, that he had great doubts. I can't tell you what they were about, but I bet they were about the strength of the church, the love of God, and all that. So Francis Schaeffer took to his attic, and he paced and he struggled with these big questions for days. Now, his wife, Edith, was very worried that their whole work as missionaries would be ruined. I mean, if your husband's a minister and suddenly he's up there with doubts, you know that something big is going to happen, probably. And she was thinking it wouldn't be good. But eventually, Schaeffer came down from the attic with a new assurance. And he went on to found this place, L'Abri, where I was, where disaffected youth like me could bravely ask our questions and explore for answers. When I arrived there, I was an atheist. And so I had more doubts than you can count. I mean, I was the perfect person really for him to minister to. But Schaeffer, through his own process of doubting, had become a much stronger and much more confident Christian. And so he helped many young people like me during his lifetime. And his motto, which I really like, was honest answers to honest questions. Honest answers to honest questions. So, are we doing that for people that are not showing up, or that are your children or your grandchildren? Do we have the confidence to do that? Because it takes a little effort, it takes some homework. But it really takes good listening and respect for people's questions. Well, okay, here's something else to remember. Doubt doesn't happen just once. It usually happens from time to time all throughout life. That might seem unsettling, but it really shouldn't be, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And here's another thought for you. Do you realize it's actually strange if you don't have doubts? You might not want to parade them, but if you don't have any doubts, I don't know. Are you taking your faith seriously? Do you know that you can have faith and doubt at the same time? Because faith is a matter of the heart, but doubt is a matter of the mind. And like I said, if you've never experienced doubt, you might want to ask yourself how seriously you take your faith. Sometimes, in fact, your heart and your mind are having a little conflict going on. But that only tells you you need to do your homework. You need to push yourself forward in your faith. Okay, so what about those well-meaning people? I think they were well-meaning who told you shouldn't doubt. I think they were trying to help you. And they were somewhat right, because like the first set of doubts that I talked about with, not trusting anything that's going on in our society, there's a problematic side to doubt. Okay, first we'll look at the dark side, then we'll look at the light side, because doubt, can cause us problems. So what are some of the problems that unexamined doubt, remember that unexamined doubt, can cause us? Okay, there's a few things here. And this is probably why people are afraid to admit it or even admit it to themselves, right? One, it can interfere with your prayers and confuse you, letting you get caught up in all sorts of conflicting trends and ideas. James, the book of James 1, verses 6 says, "But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind." I don't think they're saying that doubt is bad, but if you have just an open-ended doubt, you'll be like a wave in the sea, blown around. Here's another problem that, I want to admit that doubt can cause problems, but there's a good side to it. Okay, doubt can keep you from trusting God, but also it can give you an exaggerated confidence in your own mental abilities, and this goes for everybody, professors, ministers, lay people, everybody. Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 8 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge God, and God will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes." We all need to hear that. That's what I think when people go after, get all upset about fear-mongers, but they just think, I know everything, and they're trying to fool me. And it really causes harm to you, to your spirit. What's another issue? It can weaken you. Remember in the Matthew passage about Peter, who for a short time actually walked on water? Remember that famous story? Now, Jesus challenged him to do it, and with full confidence in Jesus, Peter got out of the boat and did, in fact, start walking on rough water, right? It was a storm. But when he looked away from Jesus and down at the waves, he panicked and started to go under. Of course, Jesus reached out and saved him. He didn't go, "Serves you right, you doubted." No, he didn't do that. But he did ask him why he began to doubt, because it's like, you were doing great. What happened here? It wasn't a condemnation of Peter, but it was a recognition of his great faith. Remember, no one else in the boat tried this. Only Peter tried it. So Peter actually had more faith than the other guys in the boat. So what's the lesson that these problems teach us that I just said, that doubt can cause problems? Well, it's healthier not to let doubts fester, but to explore them. It might even have health benefits, because Proverbs says if you explore them, it will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. I like that as a cure for osteoporosis. I think that would be great. So rather than telling yourself to just believe, what you really should do is not let the doubt fester in your mind. Remember, there's no shame in having doubts, no matter what you've been taught or felt. Okay, here's what I said we would get to. There's a good side to doubt, okay? Now, I don't mean fear-mongering doubt. I don't mean following the rest of the crowd because they're all afraid too, or they're all cynical. I don't mean that. What we really worry about is unexamined doubt. But there's another side to spiritual doubt that's good, because doubt can actually be helpful to your faith. If you pursue your doubts, they can revitalize your faith. And in this pursuit, you can find new possibilities for your life and for your faith. In fact, doubt doesn't even have to keep you from being happy. In fact, the exploration process can create happiness, and I know this from personal experience. I went to Princeton Seminary for my PhD, and I remember spending many hours in Spear Library. Now, all of us candidates, all of us students would be in our own little study carrels, and we weren't talking to each other, but every now and then I'd hear somebody, and I did this too, saying enthusiastically, "Yes," or "Wow," or "That's right," as each of us learned some new thing that opened up a whole world of faith and understanding. If we pursued these doubts honestly and we worked at it, we usually found wonderful answers that were actually made us happy. So you have to take your doubts seriously and work on them. If you do that, it can lead to stronger faith. They don't have to result in disbelief. Now, I urge you not to feel, as many of my spiritual but not religious interviewees did. That is, they felt, if you remember what I said, that they felt that if you have doubts, you're different and you don't belong in the church. That's not the case. Here's the benefit of taking your issues or doubts seriously. Doubt can lead you away from being an unthinking follower or an immature Christian to being a wise and mature believer. And spiritual maturity isn't really aligned with age. It can be in a young person, it can be in an older person. It's just different than age, than a kind of maturity that comes with age. Have you ever heard of the American writer Mary Gordon? She's a practicing Catholic, and here's what she said about the value of doubt. She said, "The ability to question, the ability to take a skeptical position is absolutely central to my understanding of myself and my understanding of myself as a religious person." She says, and this is a good one, this is a good quote, listen to this. She says, "Faith without doubt is just either nostalgia or a kind of addiction." Whoa, that's heavy, right? She's even grateful for doubters, perhaps thinking of the people I interviewed who were spiritual but not religious, because she says many of the ideas which I most prize as an American, as a woman, as somebody living in a relatively free society, have come to me from people who are agnostic or atheist. And I must say, I got a lot out of my interviewing of spiritual but not religious people. It made me take my faith more seriously. It helped me explain it better. I wasn't there to evangelize them. I just was there as a researcher, like a sociologist, but it really helped me too. Okay, so what's the upshot of all this? What am I going to give you as a takeaway, right? Okay, what do you do now? Take advantage of your doubts. They are an opportunity for spiritual growth. And believe it or not, that's how I ended up as a minister and a theologian. I was born in a non-religious household with a Jewish mother and an Italian Catholic father, both of them immigrants, and they were told by their religions they shouldn't get married, but they really loved each other, and they ended up having a very long and good marriage. But what they did, as a result of their religions telling them that was a mistake, was to put their religions away. So I didn't have any religion. But I had a lot of questions, like, what was I? And they got married during World War II, and I came along after World War II. Well, what about the Nazis fighting the Jews? I mean, where did I stand? Where did I fit? And these were very troubling doubts. And for a while, going to a Catholic church, I tried that. They didn't take me. And I was like, well, the girls and the women are sitting back here, and the guys are up there. What's that about? So I had a lot of reasons to have doubts. But I pursued them and ended up probably getting overcorrecting, as my mother thought for sure, becoming a minister, a theologian, working at a seminary. But it all came from exploring those doubts. See, it wasn't from being hyper-religious, because I wasn't raised to be religious. In fact, my parents thought I was a little nutty being religious. Okay, so have hope, not anxiety, as you handle your doubts. Be reassured that our faith goes through cycles, up and down, which is normal. Realize that the more you use your doubts to challenge yourself, to learn and explore, the more your faith grows, just like a muscle that you exercise. Have you been exercising your faith muscle lately? Or are you just letting it sit there and, kind of be the same? But here's the key, though, in all of this that I'm saying. Be sure to ask God for wisdom as you tackle those doubts. As it says in the first chapter of James, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all, without finding fault, and it will be given to you." So, here's what I want you to leave with. Trust that God is bigger than your most upsetting doubts. God can handle it. You won't destroy God by acknowledging your doubts and working on them. And, in fact, faith and doubt can be present in you at the same time. Finally, be compassionate on all who have doubts, including yourself. As it says in the book of Jude, have mercy on those who doubt. Well, let me end with a short prayer written by my colleague Lisa Withrow in her book, Occasions of Prayer. It's entitled Disillusionment. And probably a lot of us feel that way right now with the pandemic and other things that are going on. So here's her poem. When dreams begin to die and visions wane, it's a prayer. When dreams begin to die and visions wane, keep us from becoming cynical in our disappointments. Keep us from becoming lifeless in our disillusionment. Show us dreams of new life and visions transformed, so that we are filled with hope and joy and laughter with our trust in you. Amen.